My name is Bynum Walter. I'm an assistant director in the planning department in the city of Raleigh. I lead our long-range planning program, which includes the comprehensive plan, which is what we're here to talk about tonight. This event is part of a series of events that we're calling Community Conversations for Reflecting Raleigh, which is the next comprehensive plan for Raleigh. And that's really a guide for how Raleigh will grow over the next 20 years. So your input is really important. We can't do it without your thoughts. The feedback you provide tonight and at future events will help inform the vision and goals in the city's next comprehensive plan. You will see on your tables, there are QR codes. If you want to, I hesitate to ask you to take out your phone this early in the evening, but you could scan that QR code to go and see some other surveys about other topics we've had community conversations about already in the series. And there'll be one related to tonight's talk up later, if it's not there already. Tonight's program is the second of two events focused on infrastructure and services. Last week we heard from Joe Minicozy and an amazing panel of city staff. Joe's talk was hilarious. The panel's conversation was interesting. I encourage you to go to the city's YouTube page and watch the video. It was a lot. They were all talking about the costs, challenges, and opportunities associated with city growth. So just think about that I said a talk about that was funny. It was pretty great. So go back and watch that. Pat Young is going to talk on that same topic tonight. He's our planning director. Before I introduce him, I do want to hit a couple of housekeeping points. If you've had some food already, maybe have some food. We have tacos for Thursday this week. That's provided by Catering by Design, the in-house catering service of the McKibbin Center. Thanks to them for hosting us. If you need to be excused, the bathrooms are back out the way you came in the lobby. If you need any other accommodation, translation, assistive listening device, anything of that nature, we've got folks over here at the table on the side, and if they can't help you, the folks that helped you check in the hall should be able to connect you with whatever you need. We really want you to be comfortable, so let us know what you need. This event is being recorded, so if you want to share it with a friend, a neighbor, a colleague, or go back and watch it yourself, it'll be available on the city's YouTube channel. On each table, we have sticky notes and pens. If you have questions as we're going along, make a note. We're going to collect those later in the event and discuss those. Make sure we get your questions answered. Sarah, where are you? Sarah's up here at the front table on my right in stripes, and Matt Clem is in the back in a dark jacket. Sarah and Matt are going to be collecting those questions. So be writing down what you need help, what you want more information about. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce my boss and friend, Patrick Young. He's been the director of Raleigh Planning and Development since July of 2020. Prior to coming to Raleigh, Pat was with the city of Durham for 12 years, first as assistant director and finally as planning director. In Durham, he led efforts to help promote housing accessibility and affordability through zoning reform and to make the development process more customer-oriented, timely, and predictable. And he's now leading similar efforts in Raleigh. He's a proud member of the Urban Land Institute, the North Carolina chapter of the American Planning Association, and he also volunteers with Habitat for Humanity. He lives here in Raleigh, and he has a teenager at Enloe and another one at American University in Washington, D.C. Proud dad. Please join me in welcoming Pat Young to the stage.
Thank you, Bynum. Can you all hear me? Well, good evening, and thank you for being here on a rainy Thursday night. And there's a lot of other things you could be doing, but I'm really glad you're here with us to talk about one of the most important things that the city does, which is provide high-quality services to our residents, and infrastructure that goes to support those services. I would be remiss if I didn't start by thanking our partner departments. Planning and development are leading this comprehensive plan process, but the folks that deliver these services and infrastructure are in other departments. We have representatives from police and fire here tonight, transportation, solid waste, Raleigh Water, and Parks and Rec, and we really appreciate them supporting this. Let's hear it. Yeah. Tonight we're going to talk about kind of what's driving our growth here in Raleigh and how that affects infrastructure and services, and how does the growth pattern that we have experienced in the past and that the one we're trying to implement for the future impact how services and infrastructure are delivered. That's a big part of what we'll be talking about. And kind of what does our current plan say for growth and how we've been following that, and then kind of talk about what lessons we may learn for the future. And then as Bynum said, and I want to emphasize, your feedback is incredibly valuable. We're going to take all your feedback, make sure that we capture everything that you say and report, questions, comments, concerns, and make sure that City Council has those as they look at these important issues going forward. So I woke up about 2 weeks ago to delightful and expected news. And I say expected because, as you can see from this slide, we've been steadily rising up the ranks in the Milken Institute, which is a very highly esteemed economic development and growth, urban growth think tank that looks at what areas in the country provide the best quality of life and the best opportunities for their residents. That looks at how well cities and counties are run, and it looks at how well people are performing. Are they getting jobs? Are the areas growing? Is the natural environment safe and protected? And Raleigh was number one in that for 2025, and has been in that top 10 for at least 10 years. So this has really led to the fact that we have never not grown during any 10-year period since 1790 when Raleigh was incorporated. Raleigh, and that's very unusual. Most cities in America have seen booms and busts, errors of decline. Raleigh has not seen that, but we did see a significant acceleration of growth in the 1970s and 80s with a lot of businesses relocating down to the Research Triangle Park area, and then a huge increase in growth with the pandemic in 2020. And that's reflected on that slide to the left there, where I lived here for about 26 years, and we've almost doubled in population in that time. But you'll see on the slide on the right that our population density, which is the number of people per square mile, we're about 150 square miles, which is geographically larger than much larger cities like Baltimore, larger meaning population. Baltimore, Philadelphia, Dublin, Ireland, it's a long list. So we are geographically large. And the fact that we have grown so much in the last 50 years, but we have grown even more, and you'll see a graphic in this in a minute, geographically, right? And that impacts how we deliver services and infrastructure, and we'll talk more about that. So that population density has decreased. You see in the last 10 years or so, it has started to edge up a little bit. And I think that's a big part of how we manage the cost of service and infrastructure to ensure that we continue to deliver high quality services to you. This growth pattern is very unlikely to change, right? Even if we don't want the growth, and some of us don't, many of us do. I think there's a huge number of advantages as well as challenges. The fact that we have such friendly people, such great academic institutions, such as the one we're lucky enough to be standing in tonight, climate, job environment, all of it. We are one of the most attractive regions. We're the second fastest growing region in the country behind Austin, Texas, for the last 15 years. So historically, and I'll show a graphic here. This has got some moving graphics in it. I'll freeze it here in a second, if I can remember how to do that. What this is intended to show is for the first 100 or so years of our history, really the first, 150 years at least, we were very compact in our growth, right? It took us until about 1960 to get past the area that's currently the belt line, the 440 belt line. But since the 1980s particularly, our growth has accelerated, as you can see, in the Northwest and Northeast particularly, but really in every direction that we can grow. And honestly, we're at a point now where there's some areas to the Southeast and Northeast we can continue to grow, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But to the north is our water supply watershed, Falls Lake, so there's policies that discourage growth there. And then to the south is Swift Creek, that's also water supply. And then Cary and Durham are to the west and northwest. So we really are reaching kind of the outer edges of our growth, and this growth pattern really influences the cost of services and infrastructure and how we provide those services. Yeah, there you go. I'll pause it there for a moment. Frozen. I'm sorry, it took me a minute to figure that out. But you can see how much of that in the lighter shades is just in the last 25 years. About 75 or 80% of all buildings in Raleigh were built since 1980, which is pretty remarkable for a city of 500,000 people. Most cities this large have a more diverse building stock going back 100 or even 200 or 300 years. So the areas in orange are the areas that we have annexed since 2011, and I'll tell you why that's important in a minute. First of all, annexation is the process of bringing property that's not in a city, that's out in Wake County, into the city of Raleigh, right? So everywhere, if you live in the city of Raleigh, at some point since 1790, your property was annexed, unless you're in the right downtown core when that was part of the original charter in 1790. Other than that, you were annexed into the city. And that annexation process from the early 20th century through 2011, North Carolina had one of the most progressive and I think effective set of annexation laws in the country. And what I mean by that is we could extend our water sewer utilities, which is the primary service that allows folks to have more than a single family house, right? If you've got to be on a well or a septic tank, some of you may have lived in that, you need a lot of land to make sure there's room for the septic tank to discharge and for your well to stay safe. When you have utilities, you can have much, much more development. You can have commercial development, you can even have industrial development, multifamily residential. Prior to 2011 and going back to the 1930s, we could allow folks to receive our water sewer services, but we would not annex the property. We would not extend all of our, North Carolina law requires that we provide all the urban services, fire, water, police, transportation, parks, if we annex. So what the law in North Carolina allows us to do was to regulate the type of growth that could go in these areas near our corporate limits, extend water and sewer, but not actually annex, bringing property into the city and requiring those service provisions until there was a large number of units, commercial units or residential units in that area. And that's important because what that did was allow the city to recoup an amount of money that was equal or greater than the cost of the new services. Since 2011, the General Assembly changed the rules, and they require that we annex first. If we don't annex first and extend utilities, there's no obligation, no ability for those folks to come into the city unless they petition to do so subsequently. So that really what that does is mean the city has to upfront those costs. And there's a lot of areas like in Northeast and Southeast Raleigh where you see those orange dots where there's a lot of new development, there's a lot of great new development, but there's a lot of empty space that our solid waste vehicles have to drive past, that our fire trucks have to drive past, that our police vehicles have to drive past. And that's caused, essentially the risk and cost of growth has been transferred from the private property owners to the cities. That's a big part of the context here and a big part of how we have to change our approach to be fiscally sound, because we don't want to be spending your tax dollars to subsidize growth for a 20, 30-year period, at which point it would become economically effective. So we've talked a bit about this already. Growth pattern significantly affects public services, and the main way it does that is that more compact growth that has a greater diversity of unit types, a greater density, so taller buildings, is much more efficient. The cost per police officer, the cost per square foot of park, the cost per cubic ton of asphalt for roads is distributed among more people and is shared by more, and is therefore much more efficient to deliver. And the city provides a lot of services, right? So when we grow as a city, we have to extend all of those services. Tonight, really, I'm primarily focusing on what we call the key operational services: parks, water, transportation, solid waste, police, and fire. And we're really pleased to report and really proud of the fact that by and large, in much more than a lot of our peer cities, that's Raleigh on the left in those charts, and then that's our national peers, which are other cities about our size, about 500,000. Residents love the services they get. We're well above the national benchmark. You see 73% of our residents, and this is very recent data from earlier this year. 73% of our residents like the quality of services they get, as compared to 41% of national peers. So I think we're doing a pretty good job. It doesn't mean we're perfect, but we are doing a good job. And I think with the growth, our expectation, our intention is to keep the quality of services high, which is why how we grow is so important. Bynum mentioned this. I want to reiterate it, that we had a great speaker last week, Joe Minikazi. He's a really, we're lucky to have him in our backyard. He lives in Asheville. Lived in Greensboro for a while with the flood, but has moved back to Asheville. Joe is an urbanist and an architect who writes a lot about this issue of making growth sustainable through looking at how you grow. So please check that out if you get the chance. It's on our website, as well as an excellent panel of our leaders from our operational departments. So some of the highlights from that are on the slide here. I won't read each of those, but I think the punchline is that all of our operational departments are maintaining excellent level of service, but they're really straining under the pressure of the growth, particularly given the fact that there's so much new area that has to be covered, not just the new people, because a lot of our new growth, a lot of it is redevelopment and infill, as you've seen, which means historically lower density or underutilized sites becoming higher density, but a lot of it is in that traditional single family, which again, nothing is inherently wrong with that. It's just more costly to serve, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So I think that the key takeaways for me from our colleagues last week were these three, right? We need to expand partnerships internally and externally to make sure services are delivered. We need to diversify and refine our services to meet the expectations and needs of our residents, and we need to use technology to do that in a smart way. But even with doing all those things, a key fundamental issue of local government in North Carolina, and really almost every state, is the budget has to balance every year. And in order to maintain that high level of service, we need to make sure that we are getting, have areas of our city that are producing tax revenue that's sufficient to offset the cost of providing services in some of the areas of the city that have that produce lower revenue and that have lower density. And you can see from this excellent map, which is assessed land value in 2024, these areas, the North Hills, downtown, you see the area here by NC State, you see a couple other commercial centers and mixed use centers that have some of those spikes. That's where we get a majority or a near majority of our tax revenue. And they provide many, many times more revenue than they demand in services. So those areas are helping cover the cost. If you live in a lower density single family neighborhood, as I do, those areas are helping cover the cost of the excellent services we provide in your area. So as we move forward, in order to make sure that we're keeping your taxes relatively stable, we've got to make sure we get enough growth in these higher density we call activity centers. We'll talk more about that as I go forward here too, to make sure that we're covering the cost of services everywhere in the city, because both the law and our ethics and principles require that we provide the same high quality services everywhere. So fundamentally, as you have figured out by now, if you didn't already know coming in, there's a real tension here, right? We find often, and this is borne out to a large extent in our survey of our residents, that many people want three things. They want stable, high-quality services. They want relatively low-density development, and they want low taxes. Those are all three great goals. We've come very close to accomplishing all three of those for a long time here in Raleigh. The growth we're facing is going to make us make some hard choices where we're probably going to only be able to get 2 out of 3 of those and then part of the third, right? So if you can see those, the dark blue, the Duke blue, the green, and the yellow are kind of really some of the options that we have, and they're not absolutes, right? I think our goal is to try to make sure we're meeting our residents' expectations, which are those outer circles, as much as we can, but acknowledging that there's a tension or trade-offs between these things. And so as you have your conversations, I would encourage you to be mindful of how these things trade off with each other. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, the higher density uses in the right place, meaning the place where there's services, amenities, infrastructure, transit to support that density, has a ton of advantages. And Joe Minicozzi's speech from last week, which I encourage you to look at, really goes deep on this issue, so I won't today. But suffice it to say that you're getting, when you can have, say, 30 people living in an apartment building versus 3 or 4 people living in a single-family house on the same amount of land, you're getting much more taxes. Your cost of service is incrementally less, proportionally less. And I'll show a couple of examples of this. This is it's labeled suburban. This is really right in town. This is an Oakwood neighborhood, Watauga Street there. There's 38 relatively new townhouses there on the east side. I say relatively new, maybe 10 years old. And then there was 7 existing single-family houses on the west side. So that's 45 units on I think about 5 acres of land. Those things are sharing the cost of that street, which is a city street, Watauga. Fire service delivery out there, police, the nearby parks, which there are several, the dog park and several other parks in this area. That's spread across a lot of different people. And areas like this, where you have a diversity of housing types and you have a diversity of uses, tend to be higher value. That's what you saw in the map earlier. And that higher value helps produce more tax revenue, which then can help support a lot of the other services in the other parts of town. And this is an area off of Rock Quarry Road, and I can't emphasize strongly enough, there's nothing wrong with this development. We need new single-family development. We need new townhouses. This is a mix of townhouses and single-family. I'm not trying to pick on this, but this is just an example of, you can see the development to the north there. That development to the north east is county subdivision, so they don't pay into city taxes. Developed to the north is city, but all that area to the south is currently undeveloped, and there's some other county subdivisions to the south there. So this is an area where we have to provide fire service, we have to send police cruisers, we have to do all the suite of city services we have. It will fill in over time, but it may take 20 or 20 plus years for that area to look more like Oakwood does today, right? And in that interim period, the cost of serving this area will exceed the tax revenue we're receiving from that area. So that's just not a value judgment, but a reality that when we're doing budgeting and we're looking at services, we have to balance these types of areas. And, you know, as Joe talked about last week in his speech, the denser mixed-use development produces much, much higher value. He talked about Gwinnett County, which is a suburb of Atlanta. They've changed this recently, but when they first started developing in the 80s and 90s, it was all low density. The town of Cary, to a large extent, no criticism intended, but is very much like this. It's mostly low density, low slung, commercial. They don't have those types of uses like you see on the right-hand side of this. I guess that's the left-hand side. My left, my right, your left. You see where I'm talking about. So, hope you're following along at home. Sorry about that. But where you see, and of course, it's not appropriate or possible to have dense, multifamily, mixed-use development everywhere. And that's not what we're advocating. That's not what we're suggesting. That's not what's necessary. But to have areas of the community that do support that really has enormous benefits in producing the revenues needed to keep services high quality and sustainable. So again, I've made this point. Those areas that you see on this map there, on the northeast and southeast areas, are areas that we could potentially grow into over the next 20, 25 years. Based on some of the feedback we get from you all and from council, we may be bringing some policies that kind of ask us to slow down some of that growth so that we can make sure that the cost of services is manageable, and coming up with strategies to make sure that it's not degrading services elsewhere. And the main way to do that is to have at least a reasonable amount of higher density mixed use development that produces higher values and lower service costs. So again, geography is the key issue here, right? We have fire stations for fire. We have police substations. They can only support so many staff, so many vehicles. And when we grow out in areas that don't previously have growth, as you see there in the southeast, northeast, we have to make those investments. Those investments are enormous, right? They're very costly. Over time, over a 30-plus time-year horizon, they will pay for themselves with the new growth. But in that interim period, it can create a burden on the local government's budget. And areas that are exclusively single family, for example, take much longer to be revenue positive. So we really want to try to look at strategies to have at least mixed commercial, other uses that create more value and allow us to support services. So our current plan, our 2009 plan, is an excellent plan. One of our city council members, Mitchell Silver, was planning director, my role now. And I think he really led a visionary and excellent growth framework, which was to focus growth, the majority of our growth, in what we called activity centers, which are areas like downtown, Briar Creek, Triangle Town Center, where there's the mix of jobs, amenities, services, infrastructure to support the growth, right? And our 4 bus rapid transit corridors, most of you are familiar with. The Eastern Corridor is the one that we hope to get underway first along New Bern Avenue. And then we're studying one for Capitol and maybe Six Forks in that area of North Raleigh. And then the following New Bern will be Southern along Salisbury and Wilmington Street, and Western, which goes right near here, of course. So those are areas where folks could live with fewer cars because they'll have excellent transit service that is in front of their house every 7 to 10 minutes. So we developed a policy that council endorsed in 2009 to have 60% of our growth, future growth, and we are really delighted to report that we exceeded that, right? Over 60% of our growth since 2010 has been in these activity centers. That's the purple, and then the kind of yellow are areas outside of the activity centers. So we think developing a new framework that incorporates the feedback we get from you all and from other community members, of course, our city council, and trying to follow the same principles and concepts, which is, pardon me, support growth, focus growth where it can be best supported and where we can maximize the value so that we can continue to fund excellent high-quality services for the entire city. So really, I'll leave this slide up. I think this really does typify the tensions and the challenges that we face, but our community has done an outstanding job of balancing these competing interests, and I have every faith and hope that we will continue to do so, and that's particularly true with your input and feedback in this process. So thank you again for taking the time to be here tonight, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to who? Nadia Moretta with our community engagement department. Thank you. I think we have time for a few questions. Are you going to? Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I probably shouldn't have worn a long skirt going up the stairs. I am Nadia Moretta. I am one of the division managers for the Community Engagement Department. I see some familiar faces. For those who don't know me, hi. So this is the Q&A portion of our event. So you all have sticky notes and notepads on your tables with pens. So hopefully you've had some questions rise up in your heads as you've been listening to Pat speak. So this is your time. We actually have some staff walking around. So if you have a question, please just raise it up and we will pick it up for you, and they'll bring it over to me and I'll read it out loud. And there are a lot of subject matter experts in this room, so we will get you an answer. So we're just going to answer a few, and then if we run out of time, there will be a report and we'll have all the answers for you there. So write down your questions, please.
I just want to emphasize what Nadia said there. If you can't think of anything now, or you don't want to share it now, we will answer every question we get in a published report. So just repeating what Nadia said there.
Okay, first question. Is the need low density or greater capacity to create meaningful community where neighbors are friends, whether a wall or a yard separates you? What can the city do to encourage this type of development?
Boy, that's a great question. And because I'm talking about paying for costly services and infrastructure, I really focused on kind of the economics of it and the tax yield and things of that nature. But the questioner is exactly right. The real goal is to create a vibrant community where all are welcome and where all have opportunities to interact and interrelate. I've been doing this for 30 years, and you can create that kind of community in low-density residential subdivisions, and you can certainly create it in mixed-use areas, right? So I think the city does a lot of things to try to encourage our community to come together. We have an incredible parks system and community centers that offer lots of opportunities for fellowship and collaboration among neighbors. And we're going to continue to look at programs to help encourage that spirit, because we do have a lot of newcomers. Making sure people feel welcome and we get to know them is important. So that is absolutely part of it, and that's part of the suite of services we want to provide. Great question.
All right, next question. How much is the county working with the city on zoning regarding density?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. So Raleigh's about 40% approximately of the county population. Wake County's about 1.2 million, and we're about 500,000. So I think that's about 40%. We do work closely with the county on a number of things, including affordable housing. They have some really great programs that help complement the programs that the city has. And we are working closely with the county. They just redid their comprehensive plan about 3 years ago. Bynum, I'm looking at you. Is that about right? 2022, 23 maybe. And the prior comprehensive plan for the county really foresaw growth going all the way to Johnston County and to Franklin County, except in our areas where we have our water supply watersheds, which is where areas drain to where we get our drinking water. Their more recent plan really kind of changed that concept, and they looked at it, I think, a lot of the way we did, which is concentrating growth in areas that can best support it, creating kind of community crossroads so that nobody has to drive more than 5 or 10 minutes to get basic services. So we've worked closely with them, and as we look at those areas in the Northeast and the Southeast particularly, we're going to be working closely with both Wake County and our peer municipalities, primarily Garner, Knightdale, and Rollsville, to see what's the best way to get these areas served and managed. So that's a great question. Maybe time for one more?
Yeah, one more. Really good questions, though, guys. Thank you so much. All right, last question. How much consideration is being given to walkability in new neighborhoods? Are mixed-use buildings a good option for services and tax purposes?
Yeah, yes and yes. That's a great question, and it's one of the real challenges is we see huge percentages of our folks, 70, 80, 90% of folks, really say they value walkability. They want to have more walkability. It's a reality that the only way to get more walkability is to have more density, more folks that can share the cost of infrastructure, that can make transit service effective. And when you have that, you can get walkability, right? I think you see the areas where we have walkability in Raleigh are areas that do have, North Hills, downtown, parts of Briar Creek. So it's a really crucial piece. And then in terms of tax benefit and yield, it's enormous, right? These mixed-use buildings throw off 20, 30 times the value and what they demand in services. And to have enough of those in enough areas to help support lower density development, like I said, like where I live and where many of us live, pardon me, is crucially important to make sure the books balance. So, and also it just creates, there's enormous demand for walkability. I toured with the mayor yesterday, the Ironworks project on Atlantic Boulevard. That apartment building there was leased up within like 2 weeks. There's huge demand for areas like that, and so we need to make sure we build more of them.
All right.
All right, thanks everybody. Those are great questions.
Yeah, really great questions. Pat answered all of them. Give him up. That's why he's the director of planning and development.